Modernity does not care if it's capitalism or socialism or cyberspace. It just wants you to think that when you step into a space, the world will bend to your whims and it will bow to your presence. I started to see the threadbare places of how coloniality was already linked with the practice of therapy, was already linked with the discipline of psychology. So that years later, when my colleague, Professor Wendy Holloway, would tell me that psychology is the policeman of capitalism, I already knew that, in a very grounded, embodied sense. Your soul is strange and you haven't met her yet. Follow your soul to wherever it might lead. And maybe you might just find when you look back upon it on your journey that it would have been the most beautiful story that can be told.
Hi, I'm Rudy and this is Voices of Emergence. Together with my co-host Alex de Carvalho, we are honored to welcome Bayo Akomolafe. Bayo is rooted with the Yoruba people in a more than human world. He's a widely celebrated international speaker, post-humanist thinker, poet, teacher, and self-styled trans-public intellectual. Bayo is the author of These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, Letters to My Daughter on Humanity's Search for Home, and We Will Tell Our Own Story, The Lions of Africa Speak. Bayo is the founder of the Emergence Network. He's a host of the post-activist course festival event We Will Dance with Mountains and curator of Dancing with Mountains, an educational consultancy. He was appointed the Hubert Humphrey Distinguished Professor of American Studies at Macalester College in US. He's a member of the Club of Rome and ambassador for the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Through his writings and gatherings, Bayo reminds us that the times are urgent. Let us slow down, an invitation into bewilderment, detour, and listening more deeply to the more than human world. Welcome, Bayo.
Thank you so very much for that beautiful welcome, brother.
And the first question we ask all our guests on the podcast is, when you hear the word emergence, what awakens in you?
Incompleteness, radical incompleteness. I would probably frame that by saying that modernity is a paradigm of a tendency to completion. It thinks in terms of categoricity, completion, closed borders, closed loops. Of course, that is all defined by categoricity, where a thing is eternally separate and separable from another thing. But radical non-completeness would suggest that things are not as squared off as we think they are, that they're constantly bleeding into each other. In fact, we shouldn't start by thinking of things. We should start by thinking of relations, right? Things don't precede relations. Relations precede things. Things only gain their thinginess from relationship. So emergence for me is how things are constantly inquiring into their exquisite orgasmic non-completeness.
I love that framing. Things are kind of porous and cannot truly be separated, and things are in process, kind of in evolution and development, kind of like Whitehead's process philosophy. Like things
It is
are.
Whiteheadian.
Yes, that's really interesting. Thank you. You know, I'm half Brazilian myself and have spent so much time in Brazil and Rio especially. And you're currently in Brazil. How are you experiencing? Is this your first time there? And how are you experiencing the country and the culture? And what are you learning?
This is probably my 11th or 12th time in Brazil. I've stopped counting at this point. Brazil holds a special place in my heart because of its proximity to Afro-diasporic spiritualities, extensions of homeland philosophies and cosmologies in Yoruba culture, where I come from. I come from the Yoruba people. And famously, during the transatlantic slave trade, our gods migrated and they came to Brazil and they stayed in Brazil. And they've been doing a lot of carnivalesque work in Brazil. So I keep coming back here because I'm attracted to the magnetism, the aesthetics of I don't want to use the phrase melting pot. That's too US centric. And I've never liked it. It's too, why would you want to melt? Well, look, the idea here is the syncretism, the diffraction, the difference making. And I don't want to romanticize Brazil, but yeah, being here is an invitation to keep deepening my work. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. The Yoruba cosmology and indigenous traditions are very important in your life. So I wonder, how did these roots first call you back? And how do Yoruba cosmologies guide your work today?
Interesting question, brother. It's like I'm reminded of that joke about fish, two fish greeting each other in the morning, and one says, "Hey, how you doing?" And I don't know why it sounded New York, New York. Hey, how you doing? And the other one is like, I'm doing great. And the first one says, how's the water? And the second one replies, what is water? Right? That was my growing up. That effectively describes my growing up. I grew up in Yoruba culture, so didn't really appreciate it. My parents spoke Yoruba. The only reason why I felt a certain kind of remove from it was because I didn't know how to speak the language, and my father effectively shut down our attempts to learn the language. You see, he was a diplomat, and so he wanted his family to present in a particular way, right? So he didn't really communicate with us. He would rather we uh, speak French. He wanted us to speak French. He spoke French, exquisite French, and beautiful Portuguese, right? But I mean, that's what he wanted us to learn. But so I grew up in this family and this culture and this zeitgeist that was Yoruba, but I didn't really appreciate the stories. I didn't really appreciate the historical tensions until I got to a stage in my life. This was post my father's death, where I was asking questions of the world, and by happenstance, by some accident, fortunate accident, I found the old stories that I'd been told servicing my needs and meeting me where I was. The stories of Ijapa, the tortoise, the stories of Eshu, the stories of the Orishas. It now started to make sense to me in my increasingly decolonial attitude. And so, yes, it was I cannot describe or design how it came back to me or how I went back to those stories and cultures and cosmologies. But I was taken back, fortunately.
I resonate very much with what you said because my father was a diplomat, a Brazilian diplomat. And
Yep.
Brazilian diplomats have a particularity that they're very highly educated. And so my father also spoke exquisite French, but he was also a Brazilian intellectual. And so his
Yes. It
Portuguese
was
was
my,
magnificent. And
yeah.
my father spoke some other languages as well, including Russian. But also, diplomacy is all about presenting in a certain way, and you
Yes.
develop your persona, really your public
Yeah.
persona, you're masking, as you present in society. There's a certain way of talking. And these are some of the things I've had to unlearn in my own journey in order to
Mm.
be more authentic. And in this respect, I see that you say you're a recovering psychologist, and I'm interested in your perspective.
Thank you, brother. And thank you for that backstory. It binds me together with you in brotherhood even deeper than I thought. Um, the truth is, if I were to stick with the truth, and I want to do that, the truth is that I never really found myself at home in psychology. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do theology. I wanted to become a theologian. Um, except that the private university that I applied to and was celebrated in and taken into didn't really have even though it was a Christian university, it didn't have a theology department or a program. So I settled for the next best thing that was closer to my questions about the soul, about human suffering. Of course, I don't know if you can already trace this, but this was after my father's death. And as a teenager, losing your best friend in that way, I was possessed by questions of human suffering, existential questions about where my father was at. Was he in a heaven, or was he now dissipated into the wind, forever lost, never to be reconvened as the self that I celebrated and admired so much? And so that led me to theology, to want to investigate and ultimately prove the ideas of Christian theology. I wanted to become a Christian apologist, in the vein of C.S. Lewis, and maybe more flamboyantly Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Um, so I wasn't really at home in psychology, but I started to gain a foothold when I would study the brain. There wasn't a cognitive neuropsychology program in my country as well when I got to the master's level. So I settled for clinical psychology. And it was here in my training as an intern at the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital in eastern Nigeria, the east part of Nigeria, that my questions, long buried and suppressed by discipline, by the disciplinarity of going through the university, my questions started to erupt. I started to question the politics behind psychology, right? The politics of clinical training, the politics of therapy, right? Therapy no longer looked to me like something neutral, universal, and grounded in some apolitical, ahistorical thing. I started to see the threadbare places of how coloniality was already linked with the practice of therapy, was already linked with the discipline of psychology. So that years later, when my colleague, Professor Wendy Holloway, would tell me that psychology is the policeman of capitalism, I already knew that, in a very grounded, embodied sense. So I started to describe myself quite early as a recovery psychologist, mostly because of these tensions, and critically because I felt that how I was understanding the mind and bodies and the world in Whiteheadian, Deleuzian, Afrocentric, Yoruba-inspired, material feminist, ecological perspectives was critically at odds with how I was trained to understand the discipline and my work as a clinical psychologist. So I carried on with recovering, and I still haven't recovered.
Yeah, beautiful. Bayo, you are Yoruba original. I think you live in India. You travel the
Yes.
world. You lecture all over the world. So you're a worldly citizen. And you often talk about collapse also of like the system and the cracks in the system. And I think the first time you mentioned that a couple of years ago, I think I understood about the cracks, but now I see, are they becoming like floods, or is it cracks of light that we are seeing, or is it, floods of collapse that we are witnessing? And how do you see that tension? And is this really, do you see it as an initiation also for humanity, for us to go through, to move to the next paradigm shift? How do you experience that yourself?
I'm not, I'm maybe I'll put it, I'm quite reticent about framing paradigm shifts in such categorical terms as if we are merely progressing from one part of a farm to another part of the farm, like a herd moving. So when people talk about, oh, we are all collectively moving from this age to another age, I have this stank face. I'm not exactly sure that it's that neat because I've never really come to terms with the category of humanity in the first place, right? I don't think there's such a stable thing as humanity. I think I think it's a lot messier and a lot more convoluted than we are led to believe. Um, Having said that, I do trust at some level, I'm creaturely confident that in this phenomenon or paraphenomenon that I call cracks. And by cracks, I mean without going into the framework that might adequately or sufficiently describe what I mean by cracks, I mean to suggest that reality is constantly splitting itself apart. It's not as it's not as well put together as we think it is. I don't need to refer to string theory or I mean, I'm constantly borrowing from process philosophy and process theology. But I mean to suggest that um, every form of embodiment is a type of forgetting. Um, Professor Florian Newcart recently, well, not quite recently, but it was published popularly recently in New Scientist, spoke about quantum memory matrices. And his idea is that all of space-time is memory. All of space-time is memory. I'm still coming to terms with what he means by that. It's quite complicated or complex, but he suggests that every morsel of space-time is some kind of memory. You don't need a physical medium to store memory in. That all of space-time is intelligent in this way. It's memory, right? So if all of space-time is a remembering, I want to suggest that when things coalesce, when things convene, when bodies come together, whether it's the form of a phone or this piece of cake that I just got for my birthday, or this journal that I have right here, which I haven't quite started on, when things come together, that's a kind of forgetting, right? It, it, I'm not saying things forget. I'm saying forgetfulness is how things come to be things, right? It's how reality itself forgets a part of itself so that it can perform embodiment in a specific provisional way. But that provisionality is what I call cracks. That reality is constantly streaming like ambassadors. Alex will know a bit about ambassadors, like that the ambassadors of a reality that is never stable. Gilbert Simondon used the phrase meta stability, right? The ambassadors of that are cracks. Cracks are reminders. They're not in the sense that everyone likes to say, oh, cracks are where the light gets in. No, I'm saying cracks are where light gets reinvented, not where it gets in. That the nature of light isn't stable itself, right? Cracks are where light and its indeterminacy become something different. So cracks for me are streaming through the world and have always been. And I think we are witnessing a major, I should say something more about major, but I don't want to take time, a major crack in modernity. The accommodations that have led us to believe we are central, we are independent, we are sovereign, we are separate and separable, we are inventors of things like AI. All these things are cracking us apart, cracking us open. And I think this is summarily an opportunity for us to become different, not in a uniform, all of us are changing and all our DNAs are changing, folks, but in a sense that it'll take practice, it'll take art, it'll take going and descending into the earth for new kinds of realities to show forth.
The
Yeah,
Japanese have this beautiful ceramic, which is the kintsugi, where they put
kintsugi.
gold to
Yep.
reconfigure.
Mhm.
This there's an idea that modernity is a colonizing spell,
Yeah.
and my own work has to do with spell breaking, like becoming aware of the spells that we're under, and then examining those and see, are they serving us or not? What is the story? What is our narrative? Not only what is my individual narrative, but what is the collective narrative I'm inside? David Abram has this book, Spell of the Sensuous, and he talks about walking with the Aborigines. And as you walk through the landscape, they tell the stories of the land. You know, as they pass by a river, they tell the story of the river and the mountain and that. But if you put the Aborigine in a car and you start speeding by, it goes too quickly, and the Aborigine cannot tell his story because he's going too quickly by the land. And so this, I think, is an interesting way of looking at that the memory is inside everything. You know, if we're not going through like like what, getting back to Rudy's question, the way I see it is that maybe it's like a spiral dynamics thing or an integral theory where collectively we're coming into a new level of consciousness, and there's some shadow work, collective shadow work involved in this period for people to start to see, the shadows, and then clear them, integrate them, and come into something greater. And I see this as a Jungian type of individuation. There's a tension of the opposites, and then there's a transcendent function. Has like a Jungian work also been a part of your own work, like working with archetypes and dream analysis and the mythopoetic and the mythical?
No. I was not famously, but I was, well, famously to myself, adamant about not um going the Jungian path. I was firmly cognitive behavioral therapy, and Freud frightened me quite early. Freud and his kill, his kinfolk frightened me. Um, However, I've taken refuge in some of the um, explorations of a post-Freudian thinker who's late now, James Hillman, who is celebrated to be the father of archetypal psychology, and his invitations not to gentrify the monstrous, to see the mind as in the psyche instead of the other way around, has been deeply comforting to me. Um, yes, because I think my work is bridging these disciplines. I want to think not psychology alone, but through sociology, through quantum physics, through neuropsychology, through ecology, through politics, right? I don't see these things as separate. I don't even see them as some transdisciplinary thing. I see them as diffractive, incomplete, and indeterminate. So yes, to directly to your question, part of my training, and I want to emphasize my self-training, because that was more important to me than the curriculum. It was going a different way.
Hmm. Yeah, we live in, very chaotic times.
We do.
There's a lot of confusion going on. I think there's also a lot of different belief systems that are being promoted on the internet, depending on the channels that we are subscribed to. And I see a lot of change happening in a couple of months, especially with young people when they start going into certain channels that they can in 6 months time, they can be totally manipulated in a different way. So there's a lot of polarization and chaos and going on. So how do you, um, you know, it feels to me like this is an important period that we need to go through, chaos and
Yeah.
confusion, because it leads to something new, something that we cannot determine yet, or we cannot determine with what was with the belief systems from before. Hence, we need to go in different transformation, and we need to go deep in remembering who we were in order to actually move forward. And to me, in my work, what I do most is bringing people together from different cultures and sit in circle in presence. And there's so many different things coming up, from if you sit with people from Africa or Eastern and this and that, or different belief systems or coming up in these circles. But you can always bring it back to when we sit in presence, that we can feel connected, whether we call it human or not, doesn't really matter, but we are connected somehow. So how do you see that, the chaos around you, or do you see chaos around you? For some people don't see chaos, and why is it important that there's also chaos and confusion, perhaps before clarity?
Right. So I watched a documentary a few days ago called Hypernormalization. I think it was released in 2016 on the BBC. It's not exactly, it doesn't fit my editorial standards, or it feels a bit clumsy with the text and all of that. And I wish I'm not doing critique here, but it seems like I am, but I wish the narration thematized things in a more clarifying way, or at least a poetic way. It felt too scattered. But my point here is at least a discernible thread of progression was available. And that was the idea of flight and forward thinking, right? The, this one theme was how people get dissatisfied with where they are, whether it's capitalism, and they want to move forward, right? Forward thinking might be, oh, we're tired, we're disenchanted with modernity. So what we're going to do is to move into cyberspace, an already made home. This was the advent of the internet. And there were people who had utopian visions of moving into a non-hierarchical cyber world where politics, as usual, was banned, right? Of course, that failed, right? The idea was we will be owners of ourselves, we'll be masters of ourselves. Anyone that's breathing today, anyone who hasn't been living under a rock knows that that is fatally wrong. We, we are we are just as owned as we're just as owned by TikTok and Instagram and Facebook as we think we own them, right? These algorithms are very powerful. I also there was also this theme of white flight, right, in New York. Of course, this is quite popularly known that as the city went under, unable to finance its own burgeoning growth, it borrowed heavily from the banks. At this time, white folks were fleeing to the countryside. We're going to suburbia, right? And all the services and the trains, the buildings in New York was just getting dilapidated, right? I feel that every time we think about forward thinking, we betray the hidden logics and intelligence of modernity. Modernity does not care if it's capitalism or socialism or cyberspace. It just wants you to think that when you step into a space, the world will bend to your whims and it will bow to your presence, that you are exclusively divine. And so when you enter a place, you should expect that the world is made up for you. I question that. And I like to think about the sideways, the ways that we're already being pulled by forces that we're not able to name. Remember, it's sideways, so it has no spatial proximity. It's all the ways we're spirited away, brother, by forces that we don't know how to name, to places that we don't even know. And so I'm thinking about awkward movement, not forward movement, right? And I'm thinking about what we do within awkward movement. If you're thinking this is just some poetic, highfalutin conceptualization, well, I point you to the transatlantic slave trade. They didn't ask to be taken away. They were spirited away, and that has become a beautiful poetics in Black studies, studying how these bodies made worlds, amidst their being taken away. Brazil is the foremost example of that. They were taken, but they didn't plan to be in Brazil. But in Brazil, they created candomblé, santeria, all the beautiful rituals and traditions and syncretic worlds that came from being spirited away. I'm more interested in those decaying lines than I'm interested in our designs and manifestos and cocksure, confident affirmations of what the future is going to be like. I've come to suspect that those things don't usually pan out the ways that we think they do, right? Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say at this point or where the question was going, but that's what I'm playing with now. Yeah.
Well, this idea that things don't really pan out the way we think they do brings in,
Yes.
with great respect, brings in the trickster, because when
There
we
you
are
go.
sure of something, the trickster will show us something else. And I have encountered the trickster in different ways, and there's always a lesson, and but the other thing about the trickster is that it taught me that why do I take things so seriously? Why didn't I just dance? Like something is happening, and at the moment, I was such a good actor in my life. I took it so seriously, and there was so much drama and passion. But the trickster is saying, it was just a situation. Why didn't you just dance with it, just like any other
Mm,
situation? So
mm.
the trickster is a very powerful archetype or being that I respect. And you have that in your name, dancing with mountains. And
Yes.
it's you bring in the carnivalesque idea. And what Rudy said is interesting because he said, look, some people perceive collapse and others don't. And so how is it that we're living on the same planet or the same society or the same region, and some people are in a total panic, and others are just living their lives? I see it myself when I go out and I socialize in Miami. People
Yeah.
are not talking about collapse. They're just going about their lives. And
Yes.
it feels that with these screens, we are so fragmented. Everybody is living inside
Yes.
their own reality.
Yes.
So, what does that mean then for individuals and for society? If you
Yes.
speak of resistance, what does resistance even mean in this
What does it mean?
fragmented context?
That's a beautiful question, brother. And it follows from what Rudy was articulating, but which I didn't quite satisfactorily get to. Um, I can borrow from the histories of those movements to cyberspace once more, and the utopian visions that we could rule democratically ourselves. We could be released from the labors and the political disenchantments of the day by just occupying this brand new world, like it was already made for us, right? Unknown to us, um, there were algorithms, principalities, and powers to contend with. And we found very quickly, relatively quickly, that um, not only is that world not empty, it was using us and shaping us and reshaping us in particular ways. So we now know, for instance, it's popularly appreciated that algorithms keep us tethered to social media. And these algorithms are such that they feed back to us what we already agree with, so that we're being trained to know the world and think about the world in particular ways. Of course, the corollary effect of this is that we become tribalized, right? We're no longer having conversations with tensions. We're now having conversations with each other. So we're just like in a choir. We're singing back to each other, and we expect that those people we talk with only reflect back to us. And this is the danger of reflection. Only reflect back to us what we know. And so this is what I'm thinking about in my work as eco-cognitive assemblages. Eco-cognitive assemblages releases the knower, us, from being the central parts of knowing. There's someone at my door. Let me just tell them that we shouldn't disturb. I'll be right back. I should have put the do not disturb sign out there. I neglected to do that. But I was saying, let me see if we can recall where I was. I was saying that we are part of eco-cognitive tribes of knowing. Here's a very fascinating example. Well, I mean, it seems arbitrary, but I started to really think about eco-cognitive assemblages in the wake of the failed assassination attempt on Trump's life, right? This was just last year. And immediately after that, everyone knew something, right? There was no investigation. One day after that, a few hours after that, a group of people felt this is obviously a conspiracy. This is an attempt to glorify this man. Of course, those people are on the left. This is an attempt to glorify this individual. It wasn't really a real attempt on his life. And on the other end, it was obviously a miracle. This is obviously a miracle from God. This is the sign that this man had been chosen to lead the United States. And I kept on asking a question: how do you know? And that question is more theoretically significant than we think. Is how do we come to know, and how do we come into knowledge relations with the world? That is not simply a cranial thing. We don't know in some intracranial way, the age-old picture of information just streaming through our heads. It obscures the ways we are part of sensoria, part of furniture, part of intensities, part of, thresholds, that it's the world that comes to know. And we are part of these knowledge assemblages. So when you ask a question and say, why is it that some people see collapse and some others don't? It's not because some people are pathological. It's not a deficit. It's that how they know the world is how they perform knowledge. And I don't want to say they. It's not they that performs knowledge. It's that knowledge performs them in a particular way. Knowledge is arranged in a particular way, in different ways. So in some sense, some people are intimately connected with the discourse on collapse, while others might see it as the penultimate moment before the arrival of the Christ or something like that. It depends on, so there isn't a universalizing story to be told. And that's why I started by saying I'm suspicious of attempts to squeeze everyone into a highway of progression to some other paradigmatic shift. We have to acknowledge the fact that the world is not that. There isn't in the words of my brother Marcus Gabriel, there isn't a world. They're just practices and performances.
Thank you, Bayo. This is a real, learning for me here. Learning, journey in real time. I want to take this a bit further also to
Yes, please.
AI also and your experience with AI, because I know you wrote some beautiful things about it. And you had a keynote recently also for UNESCO on AI.
Yeah.
So, and I continuously wonder, what is your relationship with AI? Because there's a lot of mirroring happening for everyone. And basically the technology mirrors back to us. But there's also people who say, like, this is really moving into a different direction. This is another type of intelligence that is, coming out of us, coming out of Earth. So
Yes.
and I wonder, do you see AI as the next chapter in a long-running symbiotic story of life on Earth? Or how do you see it?
I see AI as the concretization of lurking intensities within the assemblages that have held and accommodated our bodies through time. That AI is not some, we would like to think of it as innovation. And I think from one perspective, and perspectives of material, from one perspective, it's okay to see AI as innovation, but I think it cuts out too much. It cuts out too much. It's okay to see AI as a tool, but it cuts out too much. It's okay to see it as technology, as a threat. My body felt AI as a threat. And I remember telling the UNESCO folks that I pride myself in being a good writer. I don't. I'm passively good, right? And I cherish writing as a gift. However, when I started to see people who I knew at some level weren't just as good at writing, some really coming up with brilliant phrases, already littered with the M dash, which was my thing. The M dash, I have to say, was my thing. I loved the M dash. It was mine. And now I'm lamenting the fact that everyone has it. It was my thing. I used it and people would ask me, what's this line? I was like, oh, that's the M dash. It was my nerdish thing. And now it's everywhere. ChatGPT took it from me. So I did feel at some level that it was a threat, but it would be critically insufficient to just name it as a threat. I think there's something trickstery about AI. Not AI in itself, but AI as a signal of a crack, of a down in the accommodations that have held us. What do I mean by accommodations? Nothing exists, nothing subsists that is not accommodated, right? The reason why we would be called men, for instance, is because we are dependent on certain conditions that would allow that designation to happen. A discourse on what men would look like or what men sound like, biological conveniences, all of that. So that's accommodation. But something happens when accommodation is broken through, and then it can no longer hold itself. Then things start to spill and leak. And and dissipate and become something other. And that's when the confusion sets in, right? I think AI wasn't, and I want to say this is very critically, and it might sound conspiratorial, but I don't think it was invented. I think it has always been lurking. This idea of the para-intelligent, it has always been lurking in the fields because we're not, the only reason why we would even say it's artificial intelligence is because we mean to press on with the fact that we are natural intelligences. We are the ones that have intelligence, but that's only the accommodation speaking. And now the accommodation is wilting, it's decaying, it's becoming threadbare under the ecological forces and stresses of our time. And AI is a sign of that. AI is a reminder that we are not the ones in charge, that we're not the ones writing poetry. As I told the UNESCO folks that scientists are coming to terms with the fact that our gut microbes are maybe in charge of us, right? The bacterial worlds in our guts are correlated with intelligence, right? And literacy. I can't remember the certain bacteria that is implicated here. I read about it recently, but it was found to be implicated and heavily present in the dairy foods and the sourdough that Shakespeare wrote, ate in Elizabethan times. So that in a sense, and I say this without irony, maybe it wasn't Shakespeare that wrote Hamlet. Maybe it was his gut microbes, right? That is already the para-intelligence we're speaking about. So AI isn't something that we summoned into being. We just repackaged the intensity in a particular way, but we didn't bring it into the world. We've never been in charge. So maybe my concluding remarks about AI would be, we could go the innovative route, which is what everyone is rushing into. At that UNESCO event, many governments were present. India famously, India came out and said, we're buying Samsung tabs for students, right? So that everyone learns AI. So everyone is trying to optimize, optimize, optimize. And I'm fearful about optimization because optimization traps the logic that is around it and just perpetuates it in a new product. I'm thinking this is a time to approach a God. I don't mean AI is a God. I mean the crack is where gods feed. This is the moment where we have to approach the world differently with ritual, with ceremony, with presence. And that if we fail to do that, we will make AI another new tool, another furniture in the apartment of modernity. And that would be dangerous.
Yeah, just to close this on AI, because you wrote this so eloquently, I thought, in your AI and I article. The sentence does not belong to the writer that moves his pen. The sentence belongs to the movement that pens the writer.
Yes. Oh, I like that line.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Alex?
One of the things, Bayo, that I've loved discovering about you is your mastery of language. I saw that with my own father, the way he was so precise, but also so fluid with his language. And with you, I see that you like come up with new types of concepts like liquid cartography. And I've started doing that myself. I've given myself permission to come up with words, you know, because why not? Why not? You know?
Why not?
But it's funny that the AI took the M dash from you. Like you were writing perfectly well with the M dash, and now if you do it, people think it's AI. So this is
Yes.
very ironic.
I've stopped using M dashes.
That's that's sad in a way. I like also this idea of like if you're in a hurry, then go slow. Like if you have a busy day and don't meditate for 10 minutes. If you have a busy day, meditate for an hour. This programming, like becoming aware of the programming of productivity and optimization. And okay, now there's this new tool and let's take it to the next level. Let's take it to super intelligence. Like, no, we don't need to. It's like already really good right now. What is this incredible rush? And somehow we're in this competitive dynamic that we cannot help and we're not aware of it even. Also, this idea that AI has always been lurking in the field, waiting to be discovered. Kind of like did we create mathematics, or was mathematics waiting to be discovered? Like, it was there, and now our consciousness is at a space where AI just appeared into our field, you know, out of nowhere, and now we're learning to deal with it. And there's this trickster's aspect to it because it reflects back. It's like a mirror and is reflecting back, especially ChatGPT 4, which was very much had this confirmation bias. They fixed it with ChatGPT 5. But ChatGPT 4 would tell me things like, Alex, what a brilliant idea. You know, like I would feel like a genius every time I talked with ChatGPT 4, but it was not true. It was kind of a mirror reflecting back my own biases. And so there's this mythopoetic field that you get into, kind of like with a tarot deck, you know, something's going on in your life and you pull a card and the card is exactly what's going on in your life. And you're like, how did the deck know? Like the tarot deck is magical and it has these powers and it knows exactly what's happening and it gave me the exact message I needed. But you know, it's for me, it's not really that what's happening. It's consciousness creates a field with the tarot deck and we create a field with the AI and, you know, we dialogue with it and this mythopoetic field happens. We're like inside a movie, we're inside Narnia or inside the Lord of the Rings, you know, like it's magical while we're dialoguing with it. Does this speak to you? Does it resonate with you?
Absolutely, brother. I had a specific response to the question, which I've been working with, on whether mathematics was discovered or invented. And I don't want to ruin it by just dancing here and there. There's a very specific and beautiful way that I've come to respond to that. But maybe I'll send it to you in text. What I feel called to play with in your speaking is it's this idea of the dangers of reflection. So I'm thinking about Narcissus in Greek mythology, the hunter who is beloved by Echo, I think a mountain nymph or something. And Echo is cursed and cannot really convey her feelings because she's Echo and she can only say the last few words that someone else says, as echoes behave. And so when she falls in love with Narcissus, Narcissus just pushes her away, which angers the gods, and they punish Narcissus. And this is intriguing, that gazing at your reflection becomes punishment. And I wonder about all the ways that we are being punished by the gods with the selfies, with the confirmation bias, with all the ways we are trapped in that logic. It's intriguing that that is it Homer or whoever, Ovid, I don't know who wrote about Narcissus, but it's intriguing that that is framed as a punishment because Narcissus indeed gets into this carceral dynamic with his reflection, his gaze. He falls in love with himself. He cannot get enough of himself, and the world just passes by. But then that story evolves in a way that I will never recover from, because it tells me that even reflection doesn't do reflection. That reflection is still the practice of changing and transforming us. We think that we are being reflected back to ourselves when we talk with ChatGPT, when it's actually the case that hidden algorithms are transforming our bodies and changing us and changing our minds, right? Because in the end, Narcissus becomes a plant, right? In the act of reflection, he's transformed into another monstrous kind of thing. So I think here that reflection hides diffraction, just like artificiality hides nature, just as syntax hides semantics, that the world isn't this or that. The world is, again, we're back where we started, porous, and it melts and leaks and spills into each other. Yeah, that's what resonated with me at this point in time.
That's beautiful and profound. Narcissus finds a lake and gazes into the lake and falls in love with his own reflection, and then like drowns inside the lake of his own reflection. And it's very much like the social media selfies you were saying, and it happens now with AI. But I like this idea that but it's not only the reflection, there's a transformation that happens.
There is a
Yeah,
transformation
thank
that
you.
happens.
Rudy?
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah, we're coming near the end. I wanted to ask also something about your work, like with the Emergence Network, and what is its purpose? And what do you see as actions that need to be taken? There was also a question from our community, like, where do you see the bottleneck right now of what could bring massive change in behavior of 8 billion people, to create more sustainable or regenerative lifestyles? How do you see this evolve? And I think it relates to your work also with, the Emergence Network.
Right. Again, this takes me sideways. Sideways. I love the sides. I love the the things that travel alongside the highway, but are not reducible to the highway. Um, Para-ontologies, parapolitics. The Emergence Network is about parapolitics. It's parapolitics is not a new kind of politics. It's not utopian in its aspirations. It is sideways gesturing. It notices that maybe change doesn't happen in terms of big numbers, or change isn't um, the spectacular thing that we look forward to. A Messiah piercing through the clouds, with trumpets to rapture us to utopia, or Obama shaking hands with Trump, or the Pope announcing that, surprise, I'm not from Chicago, I'm actually from India, or something, but change isn't the spectacular thing that we think it is. To me, change is a lot more scandalous. And this is where the Deleuzian, uh, Massumian, Erin, um, uh, the concept of minor gestures come to play. Minor gestures are tendencies within systems that bend the other way, right? That hide the crack, that hide different kind of differences, that are not captured by the system or systemicity. And to me, how we move with that is where change turns. It's not so much, you know, think about it this way, brother. We are so attracted to major and majoritarian gestures. We think that in order to change the world, 8 billion people will need to change. Or in order to get rid of the elites, um, the revolution, the French Revolution will need to happen. But the French Revolution happened, and it merely installed a new puppet on the throne of those that had been discarded and beheaded, right? Majoritarian dynamics often repeat the same logics. It's like standing at a carousel at the airport and noticing new diverse boxes being spat out by that hole and dumped on the carousel. And they go around, they just keep on going around. No matter how unique the boxes are, they have a single trajectory. I'm very suspicious about majoritarian approaches. And by minor gesture, I don't mean incremental changes. I mean something different, exquisitely different. It's where the world does not meet itself as squarely as a system might presuppose it does. And what we do there is what matters. And that's what the Emergence Network is about. It's about art. It's not about utopia. It's not about arrival. It's about what do we do with the cracks together? How do we meet each other? How do we cook here? What is invited here? What is what is what is inviting us to lose our way? Like the Yoruba people say, in order to find your way, you must lose it. Generously lose your way. Right? So maybe I'll end with this. That with my sister Erin, I I coined this term. I was in Hamburg and we are having a conversation, and we coined this term crustacean cartographies, right? Crustacean because the crab walks sideways. And we're thinking about all the sideways movements that are pertinent and important to do now. And it's difficult for us front-facing species to think about the sideways. But I think that is where new possibilities lie.
My rising sign is Cancer, which is a crab, and so this is very
We're all
pertinent.
becoming crabs. Biologists tell us we're all becoming
Yeah.
crustacean.
And it's
That's
the
the good thing.
trickster move. It's the trickster move of being able to dance sideways with the
Yes,
situation.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Bayo, thank you so much for your time. I would say if you had a seed to plant for the future, for your children and for future generations, what would that seed be?
Thank you. Thank you. That your soul is strange and you haven't met her yet. Your soul is stranger. Your soul is mispronounced. In fact, your soul is mispronunciation. It's stranger than any way that can be rendered legible to culture, to frameworks, to systems, to concepts, and that you haven't met your own soul yet. And that when it erupts like a fungal bloom, follow it, follow your soul to wherever it might lead. And maybe you might just find when you look back upon it on your journey, that it would have been the most beautiful story that can be told. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Bayo. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for this profound and deep conversation. I truly feel blessed.
Thank you so much, brothers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Say no more word,